We now come to the postulates of empirical thinking in general, which talks about the categories of the possible, the actual, and the necessary. But before I talk about those categories, I want to focus on a couple of pages that Kant put in the middle of these postulates of empirical thinking in the B edition, called The Refutation of Idealism. This is a very interesting but also very hard and, in a sense, problematic passage. So I want to discuss that first, and then in the next video we will talk about the postulates of empirical thinking in general themselves. So, the refutation of idealism. Now, a little bit of historical context. When Kant published the first edition of the Critique of Pure Reason, some people read him as basically defending a kind of Berkeleyan idealism. A kind of idealism which says that, there is no material world, matter doesn't really exist, all that there is are ideas in our own mind. So the external world is, well, is it an illusion? Berkeley would say, really, when it seems that we're talking about material things outside of us, what we're really talking about are our ideas. So Berkeley doesn't think of himself as a skeptic. But, of course, lots of people, basically almost everyone, thinks that Berkeleyan idealism is very problematic and a place where we do not want to end up. And so people reading Kant as basically being a Berkeleyan idealist generally weren't impressed by his transcendental idealism, and Kant himself definitely did not want to be read that way. Now, one of the most Berkeleyan passages in the first edition was in the paralogisms of pure reason in the dialectic, something we'll get to later on, where he tried to, explain or refute, really, in a sense, idealism. But the idea was that, or at least some people read him as refuting one kind of idealism by accepting Berkeleyan idealism, which didn't seem to be a very good deal. And so what Kant wants to do here is he writes a new refutation of idealism to clarify how he relates to the bad kinds of idealism, the kinds of idealism that he doesn't want to be, how he thinks of himself as relating to Berkeley, and especially how he thinks of himself as relating to Descartes and Cartesian idealism. Okay, so when we get to the refutation of idealism, what Kant does is he first discusses several types of idealism. And he starts by saying, idealism, I mean material idealism. And of course, material idealism is opposed to transcendental idealism. Transcendental idealism is good. If you are at the transcendental level, then when you're thinking about the possibility of experience and so on and so forth, that's where the subject has to play its important role, its essential role, as it does in Kantian philosophy. But at the level of the empirical, that's where we really don't want to be saying that the objects around us are ideal or something like that. It's not the case that this pencil is only an idea or something like that. No, it's a real material object that exists outside of me. Right? That's what I want to be saying. So material idealism is the kind of idealism that doubts or rejects that. Right? It doubts or rejects that there is a pencil outside of me. Okay, actually doubt and reject are the two kinds of material idealism that Kant wants to distinguish. There is what he calls the problematic idealism of Descartes, which doubts whether there really is a pencil outside of me. And there is the dogmatic idealism of Berkeley, which states that there definitely is not a pencil outside of me, which rejects the existence of outer objects. Now, to say just a little bit more about Descartes. Obviously, Descartes in the Meditations does not end up being a material idealist. Right? Descartes believes at the end of the Meditations to have proven the existence of outside objects. But he does so through, first bringing in this idealism as a kind of methodological tool, and then giving his famous arguments about God, which are supposed to show that since God wouldn't deceive us and so on and so forth, therefore we know that the material world is real. For reasons that will become clear later on in the book, Kant is definitely not going to accept this Cartesian appeal to God as a good argument. So that is that's not even on the table here. When Kant talks about Cartesian idealism, it's the idealism of the beginning of the meditations, right? This idealism where, well, really the basic move is this. It is, okay, I can be completely certain of my inner experience, right? I am completely certain of now having the idea or impression of a pencil. Idea is Descartes' favorite word. I have the idea of a yellow pencil. Whether there's actually a yellow pencil, well, that is something else. And it seems that my inner experience, my having of ideas, is what I am immediately aware of. That is what my immediate experience is experience of. It is experience of my inner ideas. And that's what I'm certain about. And what I will need before I can conclude, and that's an important verb here, conclude that there is in fact also an outer object, is some kind of argument. Right? I need an argument to take me from my inner experience to the existence of outer objects. That is the basic scheme of Cartesian idealism. And of course it turns out that if you're unwilling to bring in the Cartesian God, no such argument is anywhere to be found. Right? If you start out with experience being something completely inner, you're never going to get outside. You're never going to get to the external world. And Kant believes that that is a scandal, right? He has told us, like really in the beginning, in this very, very long footnote that he appends to the B preface, which we skipped when we talked about the B preface. There's this very long footnote at BXXXIX, Roman 39, which he says, oh yeah, here are some clarifications for the refutation of idealism. So please reread that footnote now. And what Kant says there is, he says, it always remains a scandal of philosophy and universal human reason that the existence of things outside us should have to be assumed merely on faith, and that if it occurs to anyone to doubt it, we should be unable to answer him with a satisfactory proof. And so what Kant wants to do here is he wants to give a satisfactory proof that undercuts this kind of idealism. All right, so he goes on to say that he believes that the dogmatic idealism of Berkeley is based on thinking of space as a thing in itself, and then concluding that it's kind of impossible. But that has already been dealt with in the aesthetic, right? That's the way that Kant thinks about this. Definitely, Berkeley is less skeptical than the Cartesian skeptic, right? Berkeley believes that he knows that there are no external objects. And so, given that he believes that he knows something, he's got to have an argument for that, which presumably Kant thinks has something to do with the impossibility of space. And therefore, what Kant has told us, Kant's positive story about space in the aesthetic, should be the answer to that. Okay, so that leaves us this problematic idealism of Descartes. The proof, Kant says at B275, the proof that is demanded must therefore establish that we have experience and not merely imagination of outer things, which cannot be accomplished unless one can prove that even our inner experience, undoubted by Descartes, is possible only under the presupposition of outer experience. Okay, that inner experience, undoubted by Descartes, is possible only under the presupposition of outer experience. So the way I just described this Cartesian idealism is that it says, okay, inner experience is okay, but what argument is going to take us to outer things, right? How do we get from inner experience to a belief in the existence of outer things? And Kant wants to radically undercut this entire picture, right? He's not going to give us an argument to get from inner experience to the existence of outer things. He is going to undercut the very idea that there is a certain inner experience that doesn't already presuppose outer experience, that doesn't already presuppose the existence of outer things. Kant is going to claim that any kind of inner experience that rises to the level of knowledge already presupposes the existence of outer things, right? And so the whole situation from which Cartesian skepticism starts, this idea where, wow, I'm so certain about my inner experiences, but I don't know anything about outer things, that's not a situation that we are ever in, right? That is just a completely wrong picture. Once we think through what is needed for inner experience, right, for knowing, like this empirical knowledge of ourselves, it turns out to presuppose the existence of outer objects. Okay, how does that go? Well, here's the theorem. The mere but empirically determined consciousness of my own existence proves the existence of objects in space outside me. This phrase empirically determined is very important because Kant makes a distinction between sort of two ways of thinking about my own existence. There is on the one hand the pure I am, right, this transcendental apperception. That is a priori, and that doesn't really prove the existence of objects in space outside of me. That's not really, well, it's not really what we're talking about here, right? I mean, it's not really what is involved in this Cartesian distinction between experience of an idea and experience of an outer thing, right? It's just not really what Kant is interested in here, because it's not what the Cartesian skeptical position is based on. What we are thinking about is the empirically determined consciousness of my own existence, which is my consciousness of inner sense, right? Of myself having certain ideas. And in particular, in this situation where we are talking to the Cartesian skeptic, the kind of inner experience that we're thinking of is inner experience of the representations of outer objects, right? So, for instance, I am now having, an episode of seeing the movement or being aware of the movement of a yellow pencil. Well, if I say that I'm aware of the movement of a yellow pencil, I'm describing it as an outer experience. Of course, the Cartesian skeptic says, no, what you are really aware of is a sequence of ideas in your mind. Ideas of a yellow pencil being at a certain point in your visual field, and there's a sequence of them in which the pencil sort of slowly, appears there and there and there and there and there and there. So that is, according to the Cartesian skeptic, what I am immediately aware of, what my knowledge is of. Whether it is a pencil, okay, that's something else. So the Cartesian skeptic agrees that I do have this empirically determined consciousness of my own existence, in the sense that I know that I'm having these ideas, right? These particular ideas. Okay, how is Kant going to show that this actually proves the existence of objects in space outside me? Here's a further preliminary thing. He had better not prove that having the experience I just had proves the existence of that yellow pencil, because that would be too strong, right? I mean, sometimes we have experiences that actually turn out to be only something inner. There's nothing outer that corresponds to it, right? It was an illusion, or it was an hallucination, or something like that. So Kant had better prove this at a more general level. Like, he had better prove that it requires the existence of objects in space outside of me, sort of in general, not this particular object. And that is exactly the level at which Kant is going to operate. Okay. I am conscious of my existence as determined in time, Kant says. Right? I mean, this experience, my inner experience, is inner experience of myself as temporal. Right? Even if I'm not sort of maybe experiencing my whole life or something like that, wow, I mean, just in experiencing this as a movement from one side to another side, I am experiencing myself in time, right? I am experiencing my existence as determined in time. Time. This might allow us to already sort of feel where this is going, right? Because Kant has been saying a lot about what is required for like objective time determination for an experience that is the experience of something that is determined in time, that has determinate relations in time in the analogies. Absolutely. All time determination presupposes something persistent in perception. That was the basic, not so much the outcome maybe, but the basic premise of the first analogy, right? In order to put all these things in time, I need this sort of this background, this persistent thing that generates a unity, right? This persistent thing that allows me to have a unity of things represented as part of the same time by letting me represent things as all connected to this persisting underlying substratum, right? That was the basic idea of the first analogy. And now what Kant is going to do is he is going to say, well, yes, we absolutely need that. There is nothing in inner experience that can do this job. The only thing that can do this job is the substance of outer experience, right? It's this kind of, this persistent substance of the external world is the only thing that can play the transcendental role of being this persisting thing which allows me to put things together in one time. And so if it is possible for me to put my inner experiences in time, to represent them as a time determination, which it clearly is, I am already positing this outer substance. That is the rough shape of Kant's idea, of Kant's proof here. So he says, this persisting thing, however, cannot be something in me, since my own existence in time can first be determined only through this persistent thing. And Kant says, in the footnote, in the preface, he says, please take out this sentence and write down this. And what we ought to write down is, this persistent thing, however, cannot be an intuition in me. It can't be an intuition in me. It's got to be an intuition outside of me, in other words. For all grounds of determination of my existence that can be encountered in me are representations, and as such require something persistent that is distinct even from them, in relation to which their change, thus my existence in the time in which they change, can be determined. And so Kant's basic idea would seem to be that there is an asymmetry between what can be found in me and what can be found outside of me. Right? In me, there are only these representations. Now, the way that Kant seems to think about this, is that it would be wrong to think of my representations as states of an underlying substance that is the subject. Right? There is no such substance. We are not aware of any such substance. We don't need to posit any such substance. In fact, we do not, in our experience, represent the appearances as modifications of ourselves. Right? We represent them as modifications of this substance that is the external world. Now, Kant does not say that much more about this, and his ideas about this asymmetry between inner and outer sense are related to his ideas about what inner sense really is, and this is one of the most difficult and obscure questions really that runs through the Critique of Pure Reason. So it's a crucial step here, and it does, I hope, have some intuitive plausibility. Right? So the intuitive idea here is that if I just look at myself, at my inner experience, then what is there are appearances, but there's no object. Right? Appearances rise, well, really they rise to the level of appearance, sensation rises to the level of appearance, only by being related to an object. no such object is available sort of inside of me. There's nothing there that there's nothing like in this purely temporal, non-spatial sense of my inner experience that, is the kind of thing, or, anything that can play the role of a substance that the appearances, that is the object of the appearances. In outer experience, on the other hand, there is something. Kant talks about the impenetrability in space. Like it's matter, it's the bare, like, we don't have a physical theory of matter here, but it's the idea of matter outside in space that allows me to think of everything that happens and think of everything that I experience as modifications of that. And there's no such thing in inner experience. There's no such thing as matter can be found in inner experience. Something like that seems to be in Kant's mind here. I think it's fair to say that we would have liked to hear more, but this is the basic underlying idea. So Kant goes on and he says, thus the perception of this persistent thing is possible only through a thing outside me, and not through the mere representation of a thing outside me, because a mere representation would again be, something that I could think of as being purely internal. I need to really posit an object, right? I need to really posit an object, a thing outside me. Consequently, the determination of my existence in time is possible only by means of the existence of actual things that I perceive outside myself. Now, consciousness in time is necessarily combined with the consciousness of the possibility of this time determination. Therefore, it is also necessarily combined with the existence of the things outside me as the condition of time determination. That is, the consciousness of my own existence is at the same time, and again we said the consciousness of my empirically determined existence, is at the same time an immediate consciousness of the existence of other things outside me. And so again, what Kant wants to be saying here is that if we think through how inner experience works, well, it involves time determination. Time determination involves relating things to this persistent, relating the appearances to this persistent thing. That is what allows me to put all of them in time. There is no such persistent thing in inner experience. There's only such a persistent thing in outer experience. It is matter, it is substance in space. And that is why when I even consider myself as having these determined in time subjective states, in other words, when I have inner experience as something that rises to the level of knowledge, right? That is not just arbitrary, but really inner experience, knowledge about myself, about my inner states. Then this presupposes that I can put all of them in time, but that presupposes a link to something that is persisting, and that presupposes the reality of something outside me. That is the reality of something in space, right? That is the Kantian argument. And again, I would say that the sort of the most difficult part of that is this idea that the persisting must be substance in space, cannot be the self. And maybe we learn a little bit more about that in the paralogisms. Maybe there are, in Kant, what Kant says elsewhere about inner sense and about the self, the elements that we need to defend that thesis. Kant doesn't say too much about it here. But that is the basic idea. And I think that at the very, very least, even if, like, as an argument here, it might go a little bit quickly, and it might not be like 100% convincing because there is this one crucial step that we would really like to hear more about. Nevertheless, what Kant is doing here is he is giving an absolutely radical and completely new refutation of Cartesian skepticism. Right? A refutation that does not accept the terms in which Descartes posits the problem. The terms where he says, okay, we are immediately aware only of inner sense, of inner experience. Give us an argument that shows the reality of outer things. And Kant says, no, there is no difference. Rather, these two things are bound up. You can only have this inner experience by already believing in, by already positing outer existence, right? And that is why Kant says that it is proved, this is, so he says at the end of the proof, the consciousness of my own existence is at the same time an immediate consciousness of the existence of other things outside me. It's not that the consciousness of my own existence leads to this proof of the existence of other things outside me. That would be mediate. No, it is immediate, right? That distinction that Descartes made between sort of this enclosed self and the world outside and the veil of ideas between them, and we need to get from one side to the other through an argument, that is just discarded by Kant as a wrong picture, a wrong way of going about it. And that is surely right. Right? I mean, if you accept the terms of Descartes, then it's really hard to see how you could ever get to the desired conclusion. If we are subjects trapped behind a veil of ideas, how do we ever get to the outer world? And so I think that Kant is doing something very important here. Right? He is really trying to undercut this Cartesian skepticism at the ground level, at the level of the very picture from which it starts. And he is at least giving a suggestive story about how his own transcendental idealism might have the ingredients of doing this, of answering the skeptical charge, like at the 0 point.